Hello everybody, Planet Walls here, and we are back for playing the Unplayable. And this is Classic Quarter Classic League Qualifier Tournament 2 for the 2013 Invitational season. I think I got that right. And the deck you are looking at is a version of Red-Green Splash Black Lumberamp. So it's focusing on this little guy. I'm going to talk about this deck as quickly as possible. There's no other deck like it in the format right now. Chris and I were actually sober when we made it, though one would be forgiven for thinking otherwise. And finally, I should note, both of us, Chris and I, have worked on different versions of this deck, and I think I would make a number of changes before playing it again, but I'll wait till I submit it for a DE or something before I talk about why I've made those changes. Right now I'll talk about the logic behind the decisions that we did make for building this deck, and Chris Cool has a version similar but not the same. His is running more summoning traps, which I think is probably right hand. But his is a summoning trap-centric strategy. It's not necessarily what I'm doing. Mine is actually fauna shaman-centric, which I think is better than survival of the fittest, honestly. So we'll talk about this a little bit. First things first, the things you want to look at are the fact that there are 9 1-mana ramp cards. Orcish Lumberjack has the possibility of giving you a turn 2 5 mana, which is a ton, because you have a forest that you can tap and then sacrifice and then a second land. And so, in theory, you can hit these things up here on your second turn. You can hit 4 drops on your second turn if your opponents have played 1 sphere effect. And you can easily hit 3 drops if on your second turn, even against shop decks that have played prison effects. So that's important. So we've got these 9 1-mana cards. The mix between Deathrite Shamans and Birds is questionable. I think I might rather play... Well, we can talk about what I would rather do some other time. The important thing is they produce a lot of mana. Unfortunately, Lumberjack here does not have a job. He is just a creature orc. He is not a creature mech warrior, even though that's what his art would make you seem. That would be way more than a 1/1 these days, given the art. I mean, this Deathrite Shaman can block this guy with a saw blade and a mech all day long, apparently. I mean, can't this guy be like Orc Laborer, at least, or Orc Timber Cutter, or Orc Jack? I don't know. Chris has named the deck Mid-Range Jacking, which, while it alludes to I was going to say autonomous, hopefully all sex acts are autonomous, but I was going to say, well, while it alludes to what is loosely describable as a sex act, also refers to the jacking of trees into lumber, or something. I'm not sure what the jack part... Anyway, we're going to move on. So we've got 3 Fauna Shamans, which I think are must counters because they can make all sorts of bad things happen for fish decks. Extra Ramp and Bloom Tender, it normally produces 1 or 2 because there's so many red creatures in the deck, and it itself is green. But if you have a Deathrite, it produces 3, which is pretty big. There's 1 Thrun. This can come out on turn 2 pretty easily a lot of the time if you're jacked up. 4 Magi of the Moon, which are also must counters against a lot of decks, and create a difficult situation for them to win through. There are 4 basic forests, which is worth noting, and so even though you're going to jack those away a lot of the time, that's okay. Magus the Moon does make the Taigas and Stomping Grounds non-mountains. I'm sorry, makes the mountains. They're non-forests once you have the Magi, a Magus of the Moon out, which makes jacking a little harder, but oftentimes it's worth it because they have to deal with the fact that they don't have anything but red mana, or very little mana access. There are 2 main deck Seeds of Innocence. This is Shatterstorm plus they gain life, but a Shatterstorm for 1 cheaper in green, so Corrosion for 1 cheaper. I debated what to put in the slot. I think in retrospect, I probably would have wanted more Caustic Wasps. So this little gentleman is like Trigon Predator, but worse. Only he's also just green and a little bit easier to cast because he doesn't have a blue, obviously. He's an insect, too. He's not a beast. And he isn't as good in combat, but he's there because you can Fauna Shaman him out, and he is miserable for Workshop to deal with if you land him early. Also, we've got Hammer Mage as a tutor target and something you can just happen to rip into. He's got very little hammers and a party hat, and he wears parachute pants, and he has a cape with the night sky on it. But he kills a lot of artifacts very quickly. And dividing up Hammer Mage and only putting 1 in the main, 1 total in the whole 75 actually, makes it so that they don't want to name it with their Revoker. So essentially, dividing up the anti-artifact cards between different pieces. Magus the Moon is also good against artifacts, artifact-based decks, because it cancels out Shop. It's kind of effective, I hope. Tin Street is a quick artifact removal spell that's also a dude, and Scavenging Ooze is good against a number of decks, against both aggro and dredge to some degree. Thunderscape Battle Mage is an answer for Oath in Game 1. Oath is actually the weakest matchup I think this deck has, given its current configuration. I would do things differently next time, as I've said, but Thunderscape Battle Mage can kill an enchantment, and it's a human wizard, as is Magus of the Moon, and occasionally you get to make them discard cards, which is kind of cool. So, trying this guy out, not sure if he's good enough. I've already talked about Thrun. Flame Tongue is a good creature removal option, good in a lot of those matchups, and you can tutor him up. Caldera Hellion is like a Wrath of God, kind of. Yeah, I'm curious to see how this plays out. So far in testing, it's been good. Colonian Hydra is just this massive thing that will attack for 8 the first time it attacks, and then attack for 16 after that. I think this is a fast way to win the game. It can come down on turn 2, in theory. Kazul, we'll talk about him in a minute. Molder Slug is an anti-affinity and shop option, but I think it's actually not as good against affinity as I originally thought, even though it is a slug beast, and I wish it had a... I wish it were an ooze beast, or a slug ooze. Or I wish this ooze were a slug. Whatever. It's all about cavern. So Kazul is good against affinity and dredge. Basically, your opponent has to pay 3 for each attacking creature. He's almost like a propaganda for non-flyers, but you get dudes. I think he's going to cause some people to make play mistakes who don't understand what he does or aren't thinking. He's also a big body for this format. Not sure how he's going to turn out, but I'm pretty pleased with him so far in testing. Summoning Trap is a way to punish people for countering your cards. It also can... You can summon out something after they've Tangle Wired your stuff. You need to tap everything, and you can do it as an instant. So that gives you at least a way to interact. And then Rurik Thar is one of... I don't know how I feel about this guy. Basically, he makes it so they can't play that many non-creature spells. They get 1 or 2 non-creature spells for the rest of the game. So if they Swords this guy, they take 6. He's got Vigilance and Reach, which is kind of cool. I'm just interested to try him out. Probably not an ideal use of the card slot. I had wanted to play Prime Evil Titan. Chris assured me that it was too slow. You'd essentially have to look for a bunch of wastelands and then waste your opponent's lands. Hence the name Wasteland. I will show you fear and a handful of dust. But anyway, the point being that it just wasn't considered to be good enough by Chris. I think it would have been good enough. I almost tried Inferno Titan too, but it just didn't make the cut. No Soul Ring because I think it's too slow, but Mana Crypt can let you play a first turn Magus or ramp you even faster. Not sure about the Soul Ring. It might have a place here. It might seem silly to not play it, because essentially this deck as it is, it's Legacy legal, except for the Mana Crypt. And in Legacy, these Orcish Lumberjacks wouldn't get Mental Mist up, because it's banned. There's one Bayou to fuel out the Deathrite Shaman's ability, but also the birds and other Deathrites, and Bloom Tender can occasionally do that too. Anytime there's a Deathrite out, Bloom Tender can do that. Stomping Grounds are bad lands, but they're also forests and mountains at the same time. 2 caverns, I could raise the count. I'm not sure how many is ideal, because Summoning Trap already punishes people, and you want to maximize your forest count, and Cavern of Souls is not a forest. You want to maximize your forest count so you can cut them down. We get to play a little bit of Amazon Farmer here, essentially. And so then there's a mix of fetch lands. We have a lot of fetch lands because Deathrite Shaman needs them. Also, they can virtually increase our forest count. We have 10 forests total. I would have cut one of these mountains in retrospect and put in another Stomping Ground or another Cavern. Again, we can talk about that later. Let's look at the sideboard now. These 3 cards are just good against a lot of matchups, and they come in a lot of the time. The reason there's a split is because I think Meddling Mage is an issue to watch out about, and Pyroblast can be misdirected to a non-blue permanent or a spell, whereas Red Elemental Blast cannot be, so I think it's slightly better. 4 cages for Oath, because I think we have a bad matchup against Oath, and also you bring them in against Dredge. Note that that's a Nombo with Summoning Trap, so you need to either think about that or cut the Summoning Trap. There's also a 3rd Seeds of Innocence in the board to bring in against artifact matchups, and this guy, I originally wanted to play like 3 of these. So you can power this guy out against like Shop on turn 2. Here's the problem with him and why he isn't that strong. By the way, this isn't legendary because he came out before Legends existed. God, look at that art. It's pretty racist, isn't it? So this is a pretty good control card against Workshop. Not as much against Affinity, but it's still decent. Gaining control of an artifact for the rest of the game, essentially because they have a hard time killing Aladdin, is pretty good. Alternatively, him being in the board forces them maybe to bring in Dismembers when they wouldn't otherwise, so that's why he's here. The problem is, you have to force him out probably by sacrificing a forest, and then once you do that, each time you activate him, you may have to sacrifice a forest. Note that sphere effects don't affect activated abilities, so hopefully you can eventually just start hard casting things, as it were, without having to jack your trees. Hard casting, I should mean hard activating this ability. Here in the 5-drop slot, for which there is a glut of cards, we have a Rashi, which might seem like a silly idea. This guy's a big body. Also, he kills Vendilion Clicks and Delvers without being able to counter the ability, unless you have a Stifle, which is pretty strong. I have loved this guy as a one-of ever since I played him in a Kamigawa Block Gifts deck, for which he did a ton of good work, reducing the amount of hit points that a Kakusho had when my Kodama the North Tree was trampling over for the kill. Caldera Hellion. Here's the second one. This is in case you want another Wrath. This guy is stronger than you'd think. I mean, don't get me wrong. He is a 5-drop 3/3, SNID territory. But if you ran into this in a Dark Alley, you wouldn't be very happy. Stormbreath Dragon is a new card that came out, and it seems pretty exciting to me. Can't be swords, can't be bolted in one hit, and it actually has a relevant monstrosity ability that makes it absolutely gigantic in this format. And it's occasionally feasible to make that happen in Classic, even though it's a 7-drop. A 7-mana activated ability. And it deals damage to them, too. So this is a quick kill, and it's hard to remove. And it blocks Vendilion Clicks and Delvers, and even though it costs 5, I am happy with it. Zealous Conscripts is another way to punish Oath and make them nervous, because once their Emrakul plops onto the table, you can take it and win the game, essentially, in one hit, assuming that they've taken 2 damage. So I'm interested to see how this works. It also is decent against Time Vault, because you can take it and take a couple extra turns. You take their turn, it goes back tapped. You've hit them for 3, you hit them for 3 again. Hopefully you can kill them before it's their turn. This guy is nuts, and I kind of wish I'd put more of him in the board. He's not good with Summoning Trap, which is why I was originally hesitant to put more here. But on turn 2, played for 5 mana total, this guy comes out for 4, can't be countered, and smashes their face. If they've got a swords, they can deal with him, but I don't think there's a lot of good ways to deal with this guy in the format right now. Yeah, this guy is sweet. And I'm glad no one in Classic League seems to be running Mind Harness. Not that it could go on this guy anyway, but that would be pretty tough against me. Take my Kazul, that would suck. Anyway, I will be bringing this in a lot of matches, I think. The haste is nuts. Can't be countered. Variable size. Sometimes this guy comes out as like a 7/7, and wow. I'm shocked as to how effective I think this creature is. Sometimes you play him as like a 2-drop, and you just get in there for 1 to finish off a Planeswalker. Very pleased with him so far. So that's the deck I'll be playing. I don't think there's much else to talk about, but thanks for watching so far, playing Unplayable. I don't know how this is going to go. I do think this is the riskiest deck I've played in Classic League, but I say that every time, and I keep trying to push more and more into the realm of unplayability and see with what pile of cards I can be successful, at least reasonably with. So keep an eye out on mine. Keep an eye out on Chris Gould's performance if you're interested. He's playing a version that has Sires of Insanity, which is pretty sweet. And I think he found success in the first round, actually. So I will see you in round 1, and I look forward to smashing some stupid robot face.